Ismael, Abraham's eldest son, is often a forgotten figure in Bible stories. His life is filled with struggles, loneliness, and resilience. While many talk about his brother, Isaac, Ismael may seem like a less important story. But did you know that Ismael's life can teach us a lot about dealing with rejection and finding our place in the world? He faced challenges that many of us feel, like not being seen or loved. As we explore his story, we discover that Ismael can be a symbol of hope for anyone who feels alone or overlooked. Ismael's story shows that even in tough times, there's always room for forgiveness and God's help. Just as Ismael found a new beginning, we can also discover ways to heal and move forward. Join us as we dive into Ismael's life and learn how his story can help us feel more connected and loved in our own lives. Ismael is a figure deeply rooted in the Abrahamic traditions, with a story that spans across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He is the firstborn son of Abraham, a patriarch revered as the father of faith. Born to Hagar, an Egyptian servant, Ismael's life begins in a complex family dynamic involving Abraham, Hagar, and Sarah, Abraham's wife. The promise of descendants through Abraham is a central theme in the Bible, but Ismael's role often appears overshadowed by his younger half-brother, Isaac, who is the son of Sarah. At the time of Ismael's birth, Sarah had been unable to conceive a child. In a cultural context where bearing children was crucial for family legacy and survival, Sarah suggested that Abraham have a child with Hagar to fulfill God's promise of a great nation. Thus, Ismael was born. His story, however, takes a significant turn when Sarah later gives birth to Isaac, a son born by divine intervention. Ismael's narrative is often seen as secondary in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Despite being Abraham's firstborn, his role is typically downplayed, with much focus placed on Isaac, who carries the covenantal promise. However, in Islamic tradition, Ismael holds a far more central role as the ancestor of the Arab people and as a pivotal figure in Islamic theology. This tension between the two brothers' roles adds depth to the story, prompting the question, has Ismael been forgotten by tradition, or is his legacy simply different? Through this exploration, we aim to shed light on Ismael's place in the broader historical and spiritual context. His story reflects not just the life of a young boy growing up in a tense environment but also the broader human themes of destiny, survival, and identity. Understanding Ismael's position in these overlapping traditions can help us grasp the nuances of his significance beyond the surface-level narrative. The birth of Ismael, Hagar and Abraham in the biblical narrative. The story of Ismael begins with Hagar, an Egyptian servant in Abraham's household. When Sarah, Abraham's wife, found herself unable to conceive, she proposed that Abraham father a child with Hagar, in hopes that this child would fulfill God's promise of numerous descendants. This practice, though unusual by modern standards, was culturally accepted at the time, reflecting the deep need for heirs in ancient societies. Hagar agreed, and thus, Ismael was born. Ismael's birth was seen as a moment of triumph for Abraham and Hagar. However, this joy was short-lived. The dynamics in Abraham's family became strained, especially once Sarah miraculously conceived and gave birth to Isaac. With two sons from different mothers, the question of inheritance and favor from God became a source of tension. Despite Ismael being Abraham's firstborn, Isaac was seen as the child of the promise, a fact that would ultimately lead to Ismael's departure from his father's household. As Ismael grew, Sarah became increasingly uncomfortable with his presence, especially as he interacted with Isaac. The Bible describes how, upon Sarah's insistence, Hagar and Ismael were sent away into the desert. This pivotal moment in Ismael's life is both tragic and transformative, marking the beginning of his journey of survival and faith outside of his father's direct protection. The story highlights themes of trust in God, as both Hagar and Ismael were cast into the wilderness with little more than faith. Yet, even in exile, God's care for Ismael was evident. An angel appeared to Hagar in the desert, reassuring her that Ismael would survive and that he, too, would become the father of a great nation. This divine promise to Ismael mirrors, in many ways, the promise made to Isaac, suggesting that God's plans for both sons, though different, were equally significant. The relationship between Ismael and Isaac, tensions and rivalry. Ismael and Isaac are often portrayed as rivals, their relationship shaped by the circumstances of their births and their mothers' positions within Abraham's household. Ismael, as the firstborn, might have naturally expected to inherit his father's legacy. Yet, Isaac, born to Sarah after divine intervention, is the child through whom God's covenant would be fulfilled. This dynamic set the stage for inevitable tension between the two brothers. The Bible recounts a particular instance of conflict when Sarah observed Ismael mocking Isaac during a family gathering. The nature of this mocking is not fully explained, but Sarah's reaction was decisive. She demanded that Abraham send Ismael and Hagar away, unwilling to let Ismael share in Isaac's inheritance. This moment highlights the delicate and often painful family dynamics that underlie much of Ismael's story. Despite the apparent conflict, the Bible does not present Ismael as a villain. In fact, God reassures Abraham that Ismael will also be blessed and will become the father of a great nation. This indicates that, while Isaac was chosen for the covenant, Ismael's life was still valued and integral to God's plan. The two brothers represent different paths within God's overarching narrative, Isaac as the heir to the covenant, and Ismael as the progenitor of a separate but equally significant lineage. In Islamic tradition, the relationship between Ismael and Isaac is viewed differently. Here, Ismael is seen as a patriarch in his own right, with no emphasis on conflict. Instead, both brothers are recognized as part of God's unfolding plan for humanity. The divergence in how these two figures are understood in different religious traditions adds layers of meaning to their stories, raising questions about interpretation, memory, and the shaping of religious identity. Ultimately, the tension between Ismael and Isaac symbolizes broader themes of favoritism, destiny, and the human need for recognition. Both sons were loved by Abraham, and both had a place in God's plan, yet their paths diverged dramatically. Their story invites readers to reflect on how destiny can be fulfilled in multiple, sometimes unexpected, ways. The meaning of the name Ismael and its symbolism in the Bible. The name Ismael carries profound significance, both in its literal meaning and in the symbolism it holds within the Bible. Derived from Hebrew, Ismael means, God hears, or God has heard. This name directly reflects the circumstances surrounding Ismael's birth, specifically God's intervention in the life of his mother, Hagar. As Hagar fled from Sarah's mistreatment, God heard her cries in the desert, sending an angel to reassure her that she and her unborn son were under divine protection. In this sense, Ismael's very name encapsulates a story of divine attention and care. The fact that Ismael's name was chosen by God before his birth is significant. It illustrates that, even before he entered the world, God had a plan for him. This concept of being heard by God contrasts with the later story of Isaac, whose name means laughter, reflecting Sarah's reaction to the promise of his birth. While Isaac's story centers on joy and divine fulfillment, Ismael's journey begins with struggle, desperation, and divine compassion. Symbolically, Ismael's name represents the idea that God is attentive to all of his creation, regardless of their circumstances. Even when Ismael and Hagar were outcast, they were not forgotten. God's care for them in the wilderness echoes the broader biblical theme that God hears the oppressed, the marginalized, and the suffering. In Ismael's story, we see how God's promises extend beyond the central figures of the covenant to those who might otherwise be overlooked. In a broader theological sense, Ismael's name invites readers to consider the power of prayer and the idea that God is always listening. Whether it's in moments of desperation or joy, the story of Ismael shows that God's ear is inclined toward humanity's needs. Ismael's life is a testament to the fact that even those who seem outside of God's direct promises are still within his care. In both Christian and Islamic traditions, the name Ismael continues to resonate as a symbol of divine listening. His name stands as a reminder that, no matter one's circumstances, God's presence and hearing are constant. This message is timeless, encouraging people to trust that they are never truly alone, even in their most challenging moments. God's promise to Ismael, blessings and descendants. Though the Bible often focuses on Isaac as the bearer of God's covenant with Abraham, it's important to remember that God also made significant promises to Ismael. After Hagar and Ismael were cast out into the wilderness, God reassured Hagar that her son would not only survive but would thrive. He promised that Ismael would become the father of a great nation, a promise that parallels the one given to Isaac, albeit with different implications. This divine promise is crucial because it highlights that, despite being outside the direct line of the covenant, Ismael was still part of God's plan for the world. God's words to Hagar were filled with hope, "I will make him into a great nation." Historically, this is seen as the foundation for the Arab nations, with Ismael being recognized in Islamic tradition as the ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad and many Arab tribes. The fulfillment of this promise is a testament to God's commitment to all of Abraham's descendants, not just Isaac. The promise of descendants for Ismael is also significant in the context of biblical history. Just as Isaac's offspring would form the tribes of Israel, Ismael's descendants became numerous, fulfilling God's promise to multiply his seed. This divine intervention in Ismael's life reflects the broader biblical theme of God working through unexpected individuals and circumstances to accomplish his will. Ismael, though outside the primary covenant, was still a crucial figure in the unfolding story of humanity. In the Quran, Ismael's role is even more prominent. He is considered a prophet and a key figure in the establishment of monotheism among the Arab peoples. The promise of descendants given to Ismael aligns with Islamic teachings, where he is revered as a forefather of the Arab nations and an essential part of the Abrahamic lineage. This convergence of traditions around Ismael underscores his importance across multiple faiths. Ultimately, God's promise to Ismael shows that no one is beyond his blessings. Even when Ismael's circumstances seemed bleak, God had a plan for him and his descendants. This promise of blessings and future generations illustrates God's generosity and his ability to bring greatness out of unlikely situations. Ismael's legacy, therefore, is one of survival, growth, and divine favor, even in the face of adversity. Hagar's role, the journey in the desert and the encounter with the angel. Hagar, the mother of Ismael, plays a pivotal role in his story, particularly during their time in the desert. After being cast out from Abraham's household, Hagar found herself wandering in the wilderness with her young son. This situation was both physically and emotionally daunting, as they faced starvation, dehydration, and an uncertain future. However, it was in this moment of despair that Hagar experienced one of the most powerful encounters with God's intervention. As Hagar sat weeping, believing that she and Ismael would die, an angel of God appeared to her. This angelic visitation is one of the few instances in the Bible where a divine being addresses a woman directly, signifying the importance of Hagar's role in this narrative. The angel reassured Hagar, telling her not to be afraid and reminding her that God had heard Ismael's cries. The angel also reaffirmed the promise that Ismael would become the father of a great nation. Hagar's encounter with the angel is a moment of profound divine care and protection. God provided not only spiritual reassurance but also physical sustenance, opening Hagar's eyes to a well of water that would save her and Ismael's lives. This miraculous provision of water symbolizes life, hope, and God's provision in the most dire of circumstances. It also highlights Hagar's resilience and faith, as she trusted in God's word and continued to care for her son in the wilderness. Hagar's story is often overshadowed by the focus on Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, but her journey reflects a powerful theme of survival and divine guidance. She was a foreigner, a servant, and a mother facing abandonment, yet God's care for her and Ismael shows that he watches over the marginalized and the outcasts. Hagar's strength and trust in God set an example of faith under pressure, and her role as Ismael's mother is central to the unfolding of his story. In the broader context of biblical stories, Hagar represents the many individuals who, though not in the forefront of the covenantal narrative, are still crucial to God's plan. Her journey in the desert and the angelic encounter highlight that God's mercy extends to all, even those who might seem forgotten by society. Hagar's faith and perseverance remind readers that God's presence is not limited by human circumstances, and that He often works through those who seem least likely to succeed. Ismael as a patriarch, his descendants and nations. Ismael's role as a patriarch is significant, particularly in the context of God's promise that he would become the father of a great nation. Although much of the Bible focuses on Isaac and his descendants, Ismael's lineage is equally important in shaping the history of the ancient Near East. The descendants of Ismael, known as the Ishmaelites, are frequently mentioned in biblical texts, particularly in connection with the Arab nations that would emerge from his line. The Bible lists Ismael's 12 sons, who went on to become leaders of various tribes. These tribes, often referred to as the princes of Ismael, spread across the desert regions of Arabia. This fulfillment of God's promise to make Ismael a great nation shows that, even outside of the direct covenant with Isaac, Ismael's role in history was crucial. His descendants became prominent in trade and commerce, especially in the caravan routes that linked the Middle East with Africa and Asia. In Islamic tradition, Ismael's descendants are regarded as the ancestors of the Prophet Muhammad, making Ismael a foundational figure in the Islamic faith. This belief reinforces the idea that Ismael is not only a patriarch but also a spiritual forefather of one of the world's major religions. The connection between Ismael and the Arab peoples highlights how the legacy of Abraham extends beyond just one lineage, shaping the destinies of multiple nations. The story of Ismael as a patriarch also touches on themes of inclusion and divine purpose. Despite being separated from Abraham's household, Ismael was not cut off from God's plans. His descendants were numerous and influential, fulfilling the angel's prophecy to Hagar that Ismael would become a great nation. This speaks to the broader biblical message that God's blessings can manifest in unexpected ways and through unexpected people. Ultimately, Ismael's role as a patriarch is a reminder that God's promises are not limited to a single group or individual. Just as Abraham was promised that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, Ismael played a critical role in fulfilling that vision. His legacy continues to be felt in the Arab world and in the spiritual heritage of Islam, reinforcing the idea that God's plans often transcend human expectations. Why was Ismael forgotten in the Judeo-Christian tradition? The question of why Ismael appears to be forgotten in the Judeo-Christian tradition is a complex one, rooted in the different theological and narrative focuses of each tradition. While Ismael is undoubtedly a significant figure in the Bible, his role is often overshadowed by that of his younger half-brother, Isaac. This is largely because Isaac is the child of the covenant, the one through whom the promise of God's chosen people, Israel, would be fulfilled. As a result, the biblical narrative focuses primarily on Isaac and his descendants, while Ismael's story is less emphasized. In the Jewish and Christian traditions, the covenant that God made with Abraham is a central theme. Since this covenant was passed on through Isaac, it makes sense that the focus would remain on his lineage, leading to the formation of the 12 tribes of Israel. Ismael's descendants, while mentioned, do not play as prominent role in the foundational stories of the Jewish people, and thus, his narrative fades into the background of the biblical text. Additionally, there may be a cultural dimension to Ismael's relative absence in the Judeo-Christian tradition. As the ancestor of many Arab tribes, Ismael is more closely associated with the peoples and nations outside of Israel. In this sense, his story does not fit as neatly into the central narrative of Israel's history and its covenantal relationship with God. This geographical and cultural distance might also contribute to why Ismael is not as frequently discussed in these traditions. However, Ismael is far from forgotten in Islamic tradition, where his role is much more prominent. In Islam, Ismael is celebrated as a prophet and as the forefather of the Arab people. This difference in emphasis highlights the broader theological distinctions between the Abrahamic religions. While Ismael might seem forgotten in one tradition, he is celebrated and remembered in another, demonstrating how the same figure can be viewed differently depending on the religious lens. In conclusion, while Ismael may not be as central to the Judeo-Christian tradition as Isaac, his story is still important. His experience reflects broader biblical themes of exile, divine protection, and God's promises to all of Abraham's children. The fact that he is remembered so differently in Islam underscores the rich, multifaceted nature of Abrahamic traditions and how each tradition emphasizes different aspects of the same foundational stories. Ismael in Islamic tradition, father of Arab nations. In Islamic tradition, Ismael is a key figure, regarded as both a prophet and the father of many Arab nations. His significance in Islam cannot be overstated, as he is considered a direct ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad. The Quran and Islamic teachings offer a narrative that elevates Ismael's role, emphasizing his piety, obedience to God, and critical part in the establishment of the Kaaba in Mecca, which is central to Muslim worship. Ismael's story in the Quran shares many similarities with the biblical account, but with some key differences. For example, while both the Bible and the Quran recount the moment when Hagar and Ismael were sent into the desert, the Islamic narrative highlights how God provided a miraculous spring of water, known as Zamzam, which continues to be a significant symbol in Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. This event is a key part of the Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage, where Muslims reenact Hagar's desperate search for water as a sign of their faith and reliance on God. Another important aspect of Ismael's role in Islam is his association with the construction of the Kaaba. Islamic tradition holds that Ismael and his father, Abraham, built the Kaaba together as a house of worship dedicated to the one true God. This event is central to the Islamic understanding of Ismael as not only a physical ancestor of the Arab people but also as a spiritual forefather who helped establish the core practices of the faith. Ismael's prominence in Islamic tradition also extends to the story of sacrifice. While the Bible focuses on Isaac as the son Abraham was prepared to sacrifice, Islamic tradition teaches that it was Ismael who was willing to submit to God's will. This difference is significant because it highlights Ismael's role as a model of obedience and submission to God, virtues that are highly valued in Islam. This story is commemorated every year during Eid al-Adha, one of the most important Islamic holidays. In many ways, Ismael's legacy in Islam contrasts with his lesser role in the Judeo-Christian tradition. For Muslims, Ismael is not a forgotten figure but a central prophet who plays a key role in the lineage of their faith. His descendants, according to Islamic tradition, formed the Arab nations, and through him, the message of monotheism was preserved and eventually passed down to Muhammad. This demonstrates how Ismael's legacy, while differing across religious traditions, remains impactful and vital to the story of faith for millions of people. The relationship between Ismael and God's covenant, a comparison with Isaac. The relationship between Ismael and God's covenant is a crucial theme in understanding his place within the biblical narrative, especially when compared to Isaac. While Isaac is seen as the child of the promise, the one through whom the covenant with Abraham would be fulfilled, Ismael is not entirely excluded from God's plans. God made specific promises to both sons, but the nature and scope of these promises differed, highlighting the distinct roles that each would play in history. Isaac's role in the covenant is clear. He was the child born to Sarah, Abraham's wife, and was chosen by God to carry forward the lineage through which the nation of Israel would emerge. The covenant God made with Abraham was passed down to Isaac and later to his son Jacob, eventually forming the 12 tribes of Israel. This covenant included promises of land, descendants, and a special relationship with God, making Isaac the primary figure in the establishment of the Jewish people. Ismael, on the other hand, was not part of this specific covenant, but that does not mean he was without divine favor. God promised Hagar that Ismael would also become the father of a great nation, and that his descendants would be numerous. This promise was fulfilled through the establishment of the Ishmaelite tribes and the Arab nations that would later trace their lineage back to Ismael. While this was not the same covenant given to Isaac, it was still a significant divine blessing that ensured Ismael's place in history. The comparison between Ismael and Isaac reflects broader themes of inclusion and the diversity of God's plans. While Isaac was chosen for the covenantal promise, Ismael's story reminds us that God's blessings can extend beyond the central figures of the biblical narrative. Both sons were loved by Abraham, and both were part of God's overarching plan for humanity, though their paths were different. This highlights the complexity of divine favor and the idea that multiple nations and peoples can be part of God's unfolding story. In the end, the relationship between Ismael and Isaac, and their respective roles in God's plan, serves as a reminder of the diversity of blessings and the complexity of divine purpose. Both sons fulfilled important roles in the history of faith, each contributing to the development of nations and spiritual traditions that continue to shape the world today. The comparison between the two offers a rich exploration of how God's promises can manifest in different ways, depending on the individual and the context. Ismael's influence on the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Ismael's story, while most prominent in Islamic tradition, also holds significance in both Judaism and Christianity, making him a unique figure in the context of the three major Abrahamic religions. Though his role differs across these faiths, Ismael's presence reflects broader themes of faith, divine promises, and the complexity of God's plan for humanity. His influence stretches beyond his immediate story, impacting the theological perspectives and historical narratives of each religion in various ways. In Judaism, Ismael is viewed as part of Abraham's family, but not the primary heir to the covenantal promises. The focus in Jewish scripture is largely on Isaac, through whom the Jewish people trace their lineage and covenant with God. However, Ismael is not entirely sidelined. His story demonstrates themes of exile, survival, and divine care, which resonate with the Jewish experience of displacement and divine intervention throughout history. Additionally, the figure of Ismael highlights the broader biblical concept of God's concern for all peoples, even those outside the central line of the covenant. In Christianity, Ismael is often understood as a symbolic figure. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, uses the story of Ismael and Isaac to illustrate the difference between those born under the law, represented by Ismael, and those born of the promise, represented by Isaac. In Christian thought, Isaac symbolizes the new covenant of grace through Jesus Christ, while Ismael is seen as representative of the old covenant and human efforts. Despite this allegorical interpretation, Ismael's story also reflects God's compassion and care, even for those who are seemingly outside the chosen line. His story is a reminder of God's mercy and the universality of his blessings. In Islam, Ismael is revered as a prophet and a foundational figure. The Islamic tradition gives Ismael a much more prominent role than in the other two religions, viewing him as a key prophet and the ancestor of the Arab people, including the Prophet Muhammad. His story, particularly the events surrounding his life in Mecca and the construction of the Kaaba with Abraham, is central to Islamic teachings. For Muslims, Ismael's willingness to submit to God, as seen in the story of the near sacrifice, exemplifies the Islamic principle of submission to the will of Allah. Ismael's legacy is therefore not just one of physical descendants but also of spiritual significance, as his life models faith, obedience, and divine blessing. The differences in how Ismael is viewed across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam reflect the theological nuances of each faith, but they also highlight the shared roots of these traditions. Ismael's story bridges these religions, providing a common point of reference and a shared figure who plays a role, albeit different, in the unfolding story of faith. His influence on the Abrahamic religions is a testament to the complexity and richness of the biblical narrative, and how one figure can carry multiple meanings across different faiths. The relationship between Ismael and Isaac, sibling rivalry or divine plan. The relationship between Ismael and Isaac is often interpreted through the lens of sibling rivalry, especially given the circumstances of their births and the tension between their mothers, Hagar and Sarah. However, when examined closely, it becomes clear that their relationship is not just a story of familial conflict, but also a reflection of divine plans unfolding in ways that transcend human emotions and expectations. From the beginning, Ismael's birth was surrounded by tension. Hagar, Sarah's servant, was given to Abraham as a wife so that she might bear a child on Sarah's behalf. But after Ismael was born, Sarah's own pregnancy with Isaac brought joy and fulfillment of God's promise, leading to the eventual expulsion of Hagar and Ismael from Abraham's household. This event is often seen as the catalyst for what might be perceived as rivalry between the two brothers, with Isaac taking the place of honor and Ismael being sent away. Yet, the Bible does not describe any direct hostility between the two boys themselves. In fact, it is only the tensions between their mothers and the divine directives that drive their separation. God's plan for both Ismael and Isaac was clear. While Isaac would carry the covenant of Abraham's descendants, Ismael would also be blessed and made into a great nation. This dual promise suggests that their roles were divinely appointed, not products of sibling rivalry, but of separate destinies determined by God. The idea of rivalry between Ismael and Isaac is often exaggerated in interpretations, but the biblical text itself shows that God had distinct purposes for each of them. Ismael's departure into the wilderness was not a punishment but a step in fulfilling God's plan for him to father a great nation. Isaac's role in the continuation of the covenant does not diminish Ismael's importance, as both sons were part of God's broader plan for humanity. In the Quran, the relationship between Ismael and Isaac is less about rivalry and more about shared faith. Both sons are honored as prophets, and both are seen as important figures in the unfolding of God's message. This perspective shifts the focus from competition to cooperation, as both Ismael and Isaac played essential roles in the history of monotheism. Their relationship, then, can be viewed not as one of rivalry but as a reflection of the diverse ways in which God's will can be fulfilled through different individuals. In conclusion, the relationship between Ismael and Isaac is not simply a matter of sibling rivalry, but a deeper story about divine purpose and the unfolding of God's plan for both sons of Abraham. Their paths diverged not because of human conflict, but because of God's distinct promises to each. This broader understanding helps to move beyond the idea of competition and instead see their stories as complementary parts of the biblical narrative. Ismael's role in God's plan for humanity, an unexpected journey. Ismael's story is one of the most powerful examples of how God's plan can unfold in unexpected ways. While much of the biblical narrative focuses on Isaac and the covenant through which Israel would be born, Ismael's journey reveals that God's blessings are not confined to a single lineage or set of circumstances. In many ways, Ismael's life embodies the theme of divine grace extending beyond human expectations and limitations. Ismael's journey begins with uncertainty. As the son of Hagar, a servant, his birth was a result of Sarah's impatience and attempt to fulfill God's promise on her own terms. Despite the complicated circumstances of his birth, Ismael was not forgotten by God. Even when he and his mother were sent into the wilderness, God's care for them remained steadfast. The angelic promise that Ismael would become the father of a great nation reassured Hagar and marked the beginning of Ismael's own divine journey. This part of Ismael's story reflects the theme of divine intervention in moments of crisis. Just as God heard Hagar's cries in the desert, he hears the prayers of those who feel abandoned or forgotten. Ismael's life is a testament to God's ability to turn difficult situations into opportunities for growth and blessing. His unexpected journey from outcast to patriarch of a great nation demonstrates that God's plan often unfolds in ways that challenge human expectations. Moreover, Ismael's story highlights the idea that God's blessings are not limited to those within the covenant. While Isaac would carry the covenantal promise, Ismael was also blessed with descendants and a significant role in the world's spiritual heritage. His life reminds readers that divine favor can extend to all, even those who might seem to be outside the central narrative. Ismael's journey, though different from Isaac's, was equally guided by God's hand. In the broader context of the Abrahamic faiths, Ismael's role in God's plan for humanity continues to be felt. His legacy in Islam, where he is revered as a prophet, and his importance in the genealogical line of the Arab peoples, reflect the far-reaching impact of his life. Ismael's unexpected journey, from a boy cast into the desert to the father of nations, is a powerful reminder that God's plans are often much larger and more inclusive than human beings can comprehend. The miraculous provision for Ismael and Hagar in the wilderness. One of the most memorable aspects of Ismael's story is the miraculous provision of water for him and his mother, Hagar, when they were stranded in the wilderness. This moment not only marks a physical miracle but also carries deep spiritual symbolism, showcasing God's care for those in dire circumstances and his ability to provide for his people in the most unexpected ways. After being cast out from Abraham's household, Hagar and Ismael wandered in the desert, where they soon ran out of water. Facing death from dehydration, Hagar placed Ismael under a bush and wept, unable to bear the sight of her son dying. It was in this moment of desperation that God intervened. The Bible describes how an angel of God called out to Hagar, comforting her and revealing a well of water that would save their lives. This act of divine provision allowed them to survive and continue their journey. The provision of water in the wilderness is rich with symbolic meaning. Water, in the Bible, often represents life, cleansing, and God's sustaining power. In this instance, the well of water is not only a literal lifesaver but also a symbol of God's compassion and his ability to bring life out of barren places. Just as God provided for Hagar and Ismael when all hope seemed lost, he continues to provide for his people today, often in ways that defy human understanding. This miracle also serves as a reminder that God sees and hears the cries of those who are suffering. Hagar named the place Bir-lahai-roi, meaning, the well of the living one who sees me, in recognition of God's awareness of her plight. This underscores one of the key themes of Ismael's story, that no one is outside of God's sight, and his provision is available even in the most difficult circumstances. In Islamic tradition, this story is further elaborated upon, with the well of water becoming the famous Zamzam spring in Mecca. The water is said to have gushed forth at the feet of Ismael as he lay crying in the desert. Today, millions of Muslims drink from the Zamzam well during the Hajj pilgrimage, as a reminder of God's mercy and provision. This tradition emphasizes the enduring legacy of Ismael's story and its significance in the faith life of millions of people. The miraculous provision for Ismael and Hagar in the wilderness is a powerful narrative of divine care. It shows that even in moments of despair, God is present and able to bring life and hope. Whether viewed through the lens of the Bible or the Quran, this miracle continues to inspire faith and trust in God's ability to provide for his people. Ismael's blessing, a father of 12 princes and a great nation. One of the key promises made to Ismael in the Bible was that he would be the father of 12 princes and that a great nation would arise from his descendants. This blessing, which mirrors the covenantal promise given to Isaac, highlights God's plan to make Ismael a central figure in the creation of powerful and influential tribes. Despite the fact that Ismael was not part of the covenant with Abraham, God's promise to him shows that his blessings extended beyond the chosen line. The Bible specifically mentions the names of Ismael's 12 sons, who became leaders of their respective tribes. These sons, often referred to as princes or chieftains, played important roles in the development of the early Arab tribes. Their influence spread across the desert regions of Arabia, and they became significant players in trade and commerce, particularly along the caravan routes that connected the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. This economic and social influence fulfilled the angel's prophecy to Hagar that Ismael's descendants would be numerous and influential. The 12 princes of Ismael also serve as a parallel to the 12 tribes of Israel, born from Jacob, Isaac's son. This comparison emphasizes the idea that both Ismael and Isaac were destined to father great nations, although their roles in biblical history differ. While Isaac's descendants formed the nation of Israel, Ismael's descendants spread across the Arabian Peninsula, eventually becoming the ancestors of many Arab nations. This shows that God's promise to multiply Abraham's descendants was fulfilled through both of his sons, not just Isaac. In Islamic tradition, Ismael's blessing is further amplified. His descendants are believed to include the Prophet Muhammad, making him the spiritual ancestor of the Islamic faith. This connection underscores the idea that Ismael's lineage was not only a fulfillment of God's promise but also a key component in the spread of monotheism. The Arab tribes that descended from Ismael played a crucial role in the formation of early Islamic society, solidifying his importance in the religious and historical context of the region. Ismael's blessing as the father of 12 princes and a great nation reflects the broader theme of God's generosity and inclusiveness. Although he was not part of the covenant with Isaac, Ismael was not forgotten by God. His descendants went on to shape the history of the Near East, playing a pivotal role in both political and spiritual developments. This blessing serves as a reminder that God's plans are vast and can manifest in multiple ways, even outside of the central narrative. Ismael's spiritual legacy in the modern world. Ismael's spiritual legacy continues to have a profound impact on the modern world, especially in the context of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. While his story is often seen through different lenses in each of these religions, the enduring significance of Ismael's life and the lessons it imparts remain relevant today. His legacy is particularly strong in the Islamic world, where he is revered as a prophet and the forefather of many Arab nations. In Islam, Ismael's spiritual legacy is most clearly seen during the annual pilgrimage of Hajj, where Muslims from all over the world gather in Mecca to retrace the steps of Ismael and his mother, Hagar. One of the key rituals of the Hajj is the reenactment of Hagar's search for water in the desert, which commemorates the moment when the angel revealed the Zamzam well. This act of faith and endurance has become a central part of Islamic worship, illustrating the deep connection between Ismael's story and the spiritual practices of millions of Muslims today. Ismael is also remembered in Islam during Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice, which commemorates Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son as a test of faith. While the Bible focuses on Isaac in this story, Islamic tradition teaches that it was Ismael who was offered as the sacrifice. This difference in interpretation highlights Ismael's importance in Islam, where his obedience to God is celebrated as a model of submission to the divine will. Eid al-Adha serves as a reminder of Ismael's role in demonstrating the virtues of faith, trust, and surrender to God. In Judaism and Christianity, Ismael's spiritual legacy is less pronounced, but his story still offers important lessons. His experience of being cast out into the wilderness, yet saved by God's intervention, speaks to themes of divine protection and mercy. Ismael's story reminds believers that God is present even in the most challenging circumstances, offering care and guidance to those who call out to him. This theme resonates across all three Abrahamic faiths, showing that Ismael's life holds spiritual meaning even for those outside of the Islamic tradition. In the modern world, Ismael's legacy is also felt in the ongoing relationship between the descendants of Isaac and Ismael. The story of these two brothers and their respective roles in God's plan has shaped the religious and political landscape of the Middle East for centuries. Today, Ismael's legacy is often invoked in discussions about the historical connections between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, highlighting the shared ancestry and common roots of these faiths. This shared heritage offers opportunities for dialogue and understanding between the followers of these religions, especially in the pursuit of peace and cooperation. Ismael's spiritual legacy, therefore, extends far beyond his lifetime. His story continues to inspire faith, resilience, and a deep trust in God's provision. Whether through the rituals of Islamic worship or the broader lessons of divine care found in his narrative, Ismael remains a figure of enduring spiritual significance in the modern world. Ismael's story and its relevance to themes of exile and redemption. Ismael's life story offers a profound exploration of the themes of exile and redemption, which are central to many biblical narratives. From his early years, Ismael experienced the pain of separation and displacement, yet his story also reveals God's redemptive power and his ability to bring hope out of difficult circumstances. This theme of exile and eventual redemption is one that resonates deeply with people across religious and cultural contexts, making Ismael's story both timeless and relevant. Ismael's exile began when he and his mother, Hagar, were cast out from Abraham's household. This was a moment of profound rejection and uncertainty, as Hagar and Ismael were sent into the wilderness with limited resources and no clear future. This experience of exile mirrors the experiences of many biblical figures, including the Israelites, who were exiled from their homeland and faced uncertainty about their future. Ismael's story reflects the broader human experience of being cast out, facing hardship, and feeling forgotten by the world. Yet, in the midst of this exile, God's intervention brought redemption. The angels promised to Hagar, assuring her that Ismael would not only survive but thrive and become the father of a great nation, speaks to the power of God's redemptive plan. Just as Ismael's life seemed destined for hardship and isolation, God provided a way for him to flourish, turning his exile into a journey of blessing and fulfillment. This theme of divine redemption is echoed throughout the Bible and offers hope to those who face their own personal exiles and challenges. Ismael's story of exile and redemption is also relevant in the context of modern experiences of displacement. Many people around the world today face exile, whether through war, persecution, or other forms of displacement. Ismael's story offers a message of hope for those who find themselves in unfamiliar or difficult circumstances, reminding them that God sees and hears their cries and is capable of bringing redemption even in the most trying times. In the broader theological context, Ismael's experience can be seen as part of a larger pattern of exile and return that runs throughout the Bible. Just as the Israelites were eventually brought back from exile, and just as Jesus offers redemption from spiritual exile, Ismael's story foreshadows the idea that God's plan includes redemption for all his people, no matter their circumstances. In conclusion, Ismael's life is a powerful illustration of the themes of exile and redemption. His journey from the wilderness to becoming the father of a great nation shows that God's plans often include periods of hardship, but that these moments can lead to profound blessings and redemption. Ismael's story continues to speak to the human condition, offering hope and reassurance that exile is not the end, but often the beginning of something greater. Ismael struggles in God's faithfulness, a lesson in trust. This act of divine intervention reminds us that even in the darkest times, God is present and ready to provide for those who trust in him. This powerful moment illustrates that when we feel we are at our lowest, it is often where we can encounter God's faithfulness most profoundly. Ismael's struggles serve as a testament to the strength that can emerge from enduring trials and a call to maintain faith in the face of adversity. Hagar's response to God's provision is equally significant. After discovering the well of water, she named the place Bir-lahai-roi, meaning, the well of the living one who sees me. This acknowledgement reflects her understanding that God had not abandoned her or her son. Instead, it highlights the importance of recognizing and celebrating God's faithfulness during challenging times. For believers, Hagar's journey from despair to gratitude is an essential reminder to trust in God's provision and care, even when the situation seems hopeless. The lessons from Ismael's life extend beyond his personal struggles. They resonate with the experiences of countless individuals today who face their own battles, whether it be struggles with identity, belonging, or the search for meaning. Ismael's story encourages believers to lean into their faith during difficult moments, knowing that God is attentive to their needs and is actively working in their lives. It reassures us that struggles can lead to growth, deeper trust, and a closer relationship with God. Furthermore, Ismael's journey also exemplifies the theme of resilience. Despite being sent away and facing the harsh realities of life in the wilderness, Ismael not only survived but became a key figure in history. This resilience is a powerful lesson for anyone facing difficulties. It encourages individuals to rise above their circumstances, trusting that their challenges can lead to significant outcomes and a deeper understanding of God's purpose for their lives. In conclusion, Ismael's struggles and God's faithfulness provide invaluable lessons in trust and resilience. His story serves as a reminder that while life may present daunting challenges, maintaining faith in God's provision can lead to unexpected blessings and new beginnings. Ismael's life teaches us that God sees us in our struggles and that trusting in him can transform our darkest moments into powerful testimonies of hope and faith. The significance of Ismael in contemporary discussions on identity and belonging. In today's globalized world, discussions about identity and belonging are more prominent than ever. Ismael's story serves as a rich resource for exploring these themes, particularly in the context of cultural and religious identities shaped by the narratives of the Abrahamic faiths. His life offers insights into the complexities of belonging, identity formation, and the quest for acceptance within diverse communities. Ismael, as the son of Hagar, represents a unique perspective on identity. His birth as Abraham's first son complicates the notion of belonging within the covenant community. While Isaac became the chosen heir, Ismael's identity is often overshadowed by his brother's prominence in the biblical narrative. This aspect of Ismael's story resonates with many individuals who grapple with feelings of being sidelined or overlooked in their own communities. Ismael's experience reflects the broader human struggle for recognition and affirmation, making it relatable to people navigating their identities today. The narrative of Ismael also brings to light issues of cultural identity, particularly within the Arab and Muslim communities. As the forefather of many Arab nations, Ismael's legacy is intertwined with the identity of these cultures. His story fosters a sense of pride and belonging among descendants, reminding them of their shared heritage and the significant role they play in the broader historical narrative. This connection to Ismael can empower individuals to embrace their identity and heritage, promoting unity and solidarity within diverse cultural groups. Additionally, Ismael's experience of exile resonates deeply in contemporary discussions about belonging. Many people today face challenges related to displacement, whether due to migration, refugee status, or societal exclusion. Ismael's story offers a narrative of hope for those experiencing similar struggles. His journey from being cast out to becoming a patriarch serves as a powerful metaphor for resilience and the potential for new beginnings, even in the face of adversity. Furthermore, the various interpretations of Ismael's story across different faiths illustrate the multifaceted nature of identity. In Islam, Ismael is celebrated as a prophet and an integral part of the faith's history, while in Judaism and Christianity, he is viewed through different lenses. This diversity of perspectives highlights the importance of understanding and embracing multiple narratives as a means of fostering inclusivity and acceptance in a multicultural world. In conclusion, Ismael's significance in contemporary discussions on identity and belonging is profound. His story reflects the complexities of cultural and religious identities, offering valuable lessons for individuals navigating their own journeys. Ismael serves as a reminder that everyone has a unique place in the tapestry of history, and that struggles with identity can lead to deeper connections, greater understanding, and a sense of belonging within diverse communities. The power of forgiveness in Ismael's narrative. One of the less explored yet profoundly significant themes in Ismael's narrative is the power of forgiveness. Although his story is often framed around conflict and separation, the underlying messages about reconciliation and forgiveness resonate throughout his life, offering important lessons for individuals navigating their own relationships and challenges today. Ismael's relationship with his family was fraught with tension from the beginning. His birth led to rivalry between Sarah and Hagar, and ultimately, the expulsion of Hagar and Ismael from Abraham's household. Despite this difficult beginning, the narrative leaves room for reflection on the need for forgiveness, not just for personal relationships but also for broader communal harmony. Forgiveness is essential in healing wounds caused by family dynamics and societal tensions, and Ismael's story serves as a reminder of the importance of moving beyond past grievances. When examining the moments of distress in Ismael's life, particularly the emotional turmoil faced by Hagar, one can see the need for compassion and understanding in family relationships. After their expulsion, both Ismael and Hagar faced immense challenges, and yet it was through their trust in God that they found hope and a path forward. This dynamic invites readers to consider the importance of forgiveness in their own lives. It emphasizes that holding on to resentment can lead to further pain, while forgiveness opens the door to healing and restoration. Furthermore, Ismael's eventual acceptance of his role as a patriarch and leader also hints at a deeper understanding of forgiveness. He did not hold on to bitterness regarding his relationship with Isaac or his position within Abraham's family. Instead, he embraced his identity and the blessings that came with it. This aspect of his story encourages individuals to rise above past conflicts and recognize the potential for new beginnings and positive relationships in their lives. In the context of the Abrahamic faiths, the theme of forgiveness is woven throughout the narratives. Just as God forgives humanity for its failings, individuals are called to practice forgiveness within their own relationships. Ismael's story illustrates that forgiveness can pave the way for peace, healing, and unity. It encourages believers to let go of grievances and to seek reconciliation, mirroring the divine compassion that God extends to all. Ultimately, Ismael's narrative, when viewed through the lens of forgiveness, offers valuable insights for anyone grappling with personal relationships or community conflicts. It reminds us that forgiveness is a powerful force that can break the cycle of pain and pave the way for healing and restoration. By embracing the lessons from Ismael's life, individuals can foster a spirit of forgiveness that enriches their relationships and communities. As we wrap up our journey through Ismael's life, it's time to reflect on the powerful lessons we've learned. How often do we let feelings of rejection or loneliness hold us back from reaching our full potential? Ismael teaches us that even when we feel forgotten, we can find strength and purpose. What steps can you take today to embrace your identity and seek forgiveness in your own life? Are you ready to let go of past hurts and move toward a brighter future? Your journey doesn't end here. We encourage you to take what you've learned and apply it in your own life. Challenge yourself to seek connection and understanding, just as Ismael did. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you can continue exploring these important topics with us. Together, let's uncover more stories that can inspire and transform our lives.